The moment Brandon Stratton saw her step off the stagecoach, something in his chest tightened, like a rope pulled too fast. The Wyoming wind pushed dust across Copper Ridge, and the late afternoon sun turned the valley gold. But Brandon barely noticed. He had spent 6 long months exchanging letters with a woman he only knew through ink, paper, and a portrait the size of a silver dollar. Now she was here in the flesh, standing on the wooden platform with her gloved hands trembling from the long ride west. Her name was Imogen Havsham, a widow from Philadelphia. In her brother Tyler's locket, she had looked calm, intelligent, burdened by a sadness deeper than words. But standing here in the real sunlight, she looked smaller than he imagined and far more fragile. Her dark blue traveling dress was dusted from the trail, and her hair, pinned neatly beneath her hat, showed the discipline of a woman raised in strict society. Brandon stayed half hidden beside the blacksmith shop, unable to force himself forward. He had written her 17 letters, each one more honest than anything he had ever spoken aloud. The words were easy on paper. Meeting her now felt like stepping into cold water, thrilling, terrifying, and impossible to turn back from. Tyler spotted him. "Brandon, come meet my sister." There was no escape. Brandon crossed the street, heart pounding harder with each step. When Imogen turned toward him, their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, fear, curiosity, all tangled together. "Miss Havsham," he said, removing his hat. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Mr. Stratton," she answered softly, her Eastern accent gentle but steady. "Your letters made this place sound beautiful. Now that I'm here, I see you were telling the truth." Her hand slipped into his, warm for only a second before she drew it back. That single touch set something moving inside him that he tried hard to ignore. They spent the evening with Tyler at the hotel restaurant. A simple meal, nothing grand, but for Imogen it must have felt like a different world. She held her fork carefully, sitting with perfect posture, yet her eyes kept drifting toward the windows where the Wyoming sky burned orange and red. "You write differently in your letters," she said quietly across the table. "More honest, more vulnerable." Brandon swallowed. "Letters are easier than speaking." "Sometimes," she said, looking down at her plate. "Honesty is frightening no matter the form." He didn't ask what she meant, but he suspected she was talking about more than grief. Over the next 2 weeks, Brandon found himself drawn to town whenever Imogen was there. They walked with Tyler, then later in careful moments alone when propriety allowed, she asked about the land, the mines, the mountains, the people. He answered every question, more aware of her than he wanted to be, aware of her voice, her eyes, the way she listened, like she was collecting each detail to tuck away inside her heart. One warm afternoon they stood beside Copper Creek, the sun filtering through cottonwood leaves. The water ran clear and bright over stones that had been smoothed by years of winter storms. "Do you miss Philadelphia?" Brandon asked. "I miss the libraries," she admitted. "But I don't miss being watched, judged, expected to mourn in a prescribed way." She picked up a small stone and rolled it between her fingers. "Here, no one knows me. It's frightening and freeing." Brandon hesitated, then said the words that had been pressing on him for weeks. "I've never been married because I've never met someone who made me want to stop being alone. Until now." Imogen froze. Her breath hitched. She dropped the stone into the creek. "Brandon," she whispered, "we barely know each other. We know each other through our letters," he said softly. "I know your heart better than I've known anyone's." She looked away, her shawl tightening around her shoulders. "I'm not ready," she said. "I'm afraid of wanting something I can't have." But the fear in her voice didn't hide the truth. She felt something too. Still, things changed after that. The town began to whisper, and Imogen withdrew slightly. She was still in mourning, still tied to the rules of Eastern society, still unsure of the life she wanted. Then one night on Mrs. Fenton's porch, with the October wind biting through their coats, she delivered the words that gutted him. "I'm leaving at the end of the week," she said. "The estate is settled. My work here is done." "What about us?" Brandon asked. There is no us, she whispered. There can't be. Not yet. Brandon swallowed hard. Then stay. Stay and build something new with me. Her eyes shined with tears. I can't. She turned away before he could say another word. The next morning, the first snow of the year began to fall. A real storm. The kind that swallowed the sky and turned the world white in minutes. Brandon rode into town for supplies, unaware that this storm was about to change everything. By noon, the snow came down so fast the ground disappeared. On his way home, fighting the blinding wind, he saw a dark shape swaying on a horse. As he got closer, he realized it was Imagigen, frozen, shaking, barely conscious, riding blindly through the storm. He grabbed her before she fell. "Brandon," she whispered, lips blue. "I was looking for Tyler. I thought he was lost. I thought—" She collapsed against him. He carried her inside his cabin, the fire crackling to life, her clothes soaked, her body trembling. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered the words that changed the road ahead. "Don't let me die, Brandon." Imagination lay by the fire wrapped in Brandon's wool blanket, her skin still pale from the cold, her breath shaky but steadying. The storm hammered the cabin walls like fists, rattling the shutters and sealing them off from the rest of the world. Brandon fed the flames again, the orange light flickering across her face. He couldn't stop staring at her. She looked softer like this, hair loose around her shoulders, her eastern poise melted by fear and exhaustion. "Brandon," she whispered, voice raw, "I shouldn't have come out in that storm." "You shouldn't have," he said, his jaw tight with worry. "But you're safe now." She pulled the blanket tight around her. "I only meant to ride a few miles. Tyler didn't come back when he said he would." I panicked. He crouched beside her. "Tyler knows this land. He found shelter. You would have died out there." Her eyes glistened. "I know. I thought the snow would bury me." A long silence filled the room, broken only by the crackling fire and the wind's angry howl outside. Brandon poured warm coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed and she inhaled sharply, as if even that small touch carried more meaning than it should. "I didn't think I would see you again before I left," she said quietly. "Neither did I," Brandon answered. "But I'm glad you're here, no matter how dangerous the storm." She gave a tired smile. "I didn't come here for you." "Then why are you looking at me like that?" Her breath caught. She looked away quickly, ashamed or afraid, perhaps both. Brandon stepped back, giving her space. He didn't want to frighten her, didn't want to push her when she was vulnerable. Hours passed, the storm raged without mercy, and it became clear she wouldn't be returning to town that night. Brandon laid out a bed for himself near the fire and insisted she take the cot. She argued, but he refused to give in. "You nearly froze," he said. "This isn't something to debate." Later, after they both pretended to settle down, Brandon heard her shifting restlessly under the blanket. He couldn't see her face in the dimness, but he could feel her worry in every small movement. "Brandon," she whispered. "Yes," her voice shook. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore." He turned onto his side to face her. "You're supposed to be whoever you choose to be."
"That's the problem," she said.
"I've never chosen anything, not truly. I was a daughter under my mother's judgment, a wife under society's expectations, a widow under everyone's pity. And when I came here, I thought I would find clarity. Instead, I found—" She stopped. Brandon didn't speak. He waited. "I found someone who sees me," she whispered, "and I don't know how to live with that." He sat up, the fire lighting half his face. "Imagigen, I don't want to change you. I just want you to stop punishing yourself for wanting a life." She swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" "Only what you want to give." The storm pushed a violent gust against the walls, but inside the cabin, the world felt still. She sat up slowly, blanket falling from her shoulders. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, nothing like the tightly pinned style she always wore. She looked young, alive, terrified. I'm scared, she said. So am I. Why would you be scared? She whispered. Because you mean something to me, he answered. And that makes anything uncertain. Something broke in her then, not in a painful way, more like a door she had kept closed for years, finally gave way. She reached forward, touching his face with trembling fingers. You always wrote the truth, she said. But tonight, you're speaking it. Brandon didn't move. He let her guide the moment. She leaned closer, her breath brushing against his throat, her hand slipping to the back of his neck. When her forehead touched his, they both exhaled like they had been holding their breath since the day they met. Tell me I'm not making a mistake, she whispered. You're not, he said, and if you are, we'll face it together. Her lips met his, soft at first, barely a touch, then deeper as if something inside her had snapped loose and refused to be restrained. Brandon's hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer. She let out a quiet, helpless sound, one that told him how long she had been holding herself together, how much she had silenced her own heart. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, everything else fell away. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes shined with fear and longing. Brandon, she breathed, I can feel again. You've made me feel again. He kissed her gently. Then don't be afraid of it. She leaned into him, and the room blurred into warmth and breath and closeness. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. She simply rested her head against his chest, as though she had been waiting years to do it. They stayed like that until her trembling stopped. But the moment was fragile, too fragile, and before dawn broke, the world outside would demand answers neither of them were ready to give. The storm ended at dawn, leaving a white world that seemed too quiet, too pure to match the chaos inside their hearts. Imogen woke first, wrapped in Brandon's blanket, her hair messy and her eyes swollen from a night of fear, cold, and something she couldn't name without trembling. She watched Brandon sleep near the fire, his arm draped over his coat, his face unguarded for the first time since she'd met him. He looked peaceful, strong, and somehow younger, and that terrified her, because everything that happened in the cabin, every confession, every touch, every unspoken truth, felt too real, too dangerous, too alive. When Brandon finally stirred awake, she stood by the window in her now dry dress, hands clasped tightly as if bracing herself. You're leaving today? He asked quietly. Imogen nodded. I have to. He stood slowly, brushing ash from his shirt. Do you want to? The question cut through her like an arrow. She wanted to say no. She wanted to stay in this warmth, in this cabin, in this possibility. But the world outside this place didn't allow such things freely. I don't know what I want, she whispered. Brandon stepped closer. You do. You're just afraid to want it. Her breath hitched. I can't live by impulse, Brandon. I can't just ignore what the world expects of me. But you can choose something for yourself, he said. You chose to ride into a storm for your brother. You chose to ride me back. You chose to come west at all.
She turned away.
This is different. Why? Because it scares you more? She didn't answer. Before either of them could speak again, a shout cut through the morning air. Brandon opened the door to see Tyler riding toward them, snow flying from his horse's hooves. Relief lit his face when he spotted Imogen standing in the doorway. Thank the heavens, Tyler gasped as he dismounted. Mrs. Fenton said you rode out in the storm. I thought I lost you. Imogen's face flushed with guilt. I shouldn't have gone looking for you. Tyler didn't ask why she was in Brandon's cabin, or why her hair was loose, or why her voice trembled. But he saw enough to understand something had shifted in the space of one brutal night. We need to get you back to town, he said gently. People are worried. Imogen gave Brandon one last look, full of longing and regret, and followed her brother. Brandon watched her ride away, the tracks of her horse cutting through the snow like ink slashes across a blank page. It wasn't over. He refused to let it be over. Over the next days, Imogen avoided him. She packed her things, attended to her late husband's estate, and prepared to leave Copper Ridge. Meanwhile, Brandon wrote and rewrote words he couldn't send. The quiet of his cabin felt heavier than ever. On the night before her departure, Tyler invited a handful of friends to his ranch for a farewell dinner. Brandon wasn't planning to go until Tyler appeared on his porch. "She's miserable," Tyler said simply. "If there's something you need to say to her, say it tonight." So Brandon went. Imogen sat at the dinner table in a dark green dress, her posture perfect, her smile polite. She looked every bit the refined widow from the East, except for her eyes. Her eyes kept drifting toward him, full of questions she wasn't brave enough to speak. The meal was filled with laughter and stories and warm conversation neither of them heard. When guests moved to the parlor for coffee, Brandon waited until she passed him in the hallway. "Imogen." She stopped. He stepped closer, voice low. "Tell me last night meant nothing and I'll walk out that door." Her eyes filled instantly. "I can't say that." "Then stay." Her breath shook. "Brandon, I don't know how to live with how deeply I feel for you." "Then don't live with it alone," he said. "Live with me." She pressed a trembling hand over her mouth, fighting herself. "This isn't fair. I'm supposed to mourn. I'm supposed to be proper. I'm supposed to follow rules." "Then follow one," he whispered. "Follow the one that leads you back to me." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I can't. Not here. Not now." She turned and walked away before he could say more. That night, Brandon couldn't sleep. He paced his cabin, ran his hands through his hair, cursed himself for not knowing what to do. Finally, he saddled his horse and rode into town. He stood in the street beneath her window, cold wind cutting through his coat, waiting for a sign. Any sign. Lights flickered in her room. A shadow moved. Then the boarding house door opened, and there she was, shawl wrapped tight, breath-forming clouds in the frozen air. "I saw you from the window," she said softly. "You always look so lost when you're waiting for me." Brandon stepped forward. "Stay. I can't." He swallowed hard. "Then let me come with you." She stared at him, stunned. "To Philadelphia?" "Yes." "Let me court you properly. Let me meet your people. Let me prove this is more than a storm and a moment." Her voice broke. "You would leave everything you know? For you, I'd leave more." She pressed a hand to her heart as if steadying it. After a long, silent moment, she whispered, "Come to Philadelphia and court me." Brandon exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening at last. "Tell me when." "In 2 weeks." She leaned forward, kissed him softly in the cold, and whispered, "Don't make me regret choosing you." 2 months later, after meeting her family, surviving her mother's disapproval, and proving his devotion, Imogen made her final choice. She returned with Brandon to Wyoming. They married in the small Copper Ridge church, with Tyler as best man. The whole town celebrated the Eastern widow who chose a frontier writer over a life of comfort. That night, in the same cabin where she had nearly frozen to death, she whispered into his arms, "I couldn't breathe without you then. I can't breathe without you now." Brandon held her close, knowing the West had given him a love larger than anything he had dared to write. Their life together had begun.